Welcome to Tomo Talks. I'm Tomo Marjanovic. We are talking today with Ashley Frater of Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, and Bentley Orlando. We're going to talk about supercars. We're going to talk about the market. Stay tuned. Ashley Frater, thank you for joining me.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
I wanted to have this conversation with you. We met a few years back, and we met kind of in a business capacity. And I've always wanted to kind of just pick your brain, sit down with you, and why not do it in front of an audience that we're going to have here on YouTube on Tomo Talks. So I appreciate you coming on, and tell me a little bit about your history. I know what you do now. Kind of tell me how you segued from your early life into what you're doing, and what your industry is currently.
Sure. We all have passions in life. My passion for cars came about from my father. So amazing guy. He as a motoring journalist. So basically as a kid, I was picked up from school in a different car every day. I never knew what it would be. Wow. It could be the Lotus from James Bond film. It could be the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. So that passion, interest, it was amazing. I got a chance to read all these reports my father was doing, and that shaped my life because he went on to work for Ferrari. He went on to have a very successful career as running an automotive PR communications company. That set the tone for me. So the passion was always there, and I wasn't really kind of sure in school where my direction was going. Went traveling, went backpacking, realized I loved different experiences, meeting people, and stumbled into a first career was working with Porsche. And I used to run the Porsche driving experience. I used to do the logistical coordination of that back in the UK, which again was fantastic. Track time, talking to people about these cars, meeting some really, really talented drivers, and understanding what good driving was.
And that was overseas?
This was back in England, yeah. I went into event management. That was my specific field, the automotive sector. I did deviate through to pharmaceutical for 6 years, but just had this amazing life where constant travel, different people, different product, race circuits. Just it was heavenly. And it's funny how life sort of evolves, because I spent the last years back in England working with Bentley, with Rolls-Royce, some of the best brands in the world. I had my son, and that was the defining moment for me. He's 6 years old, Edward, and when he came along, it was this moment of thinking, well, what do I want out of the next half of life? And my opportunity to move to America was just too good one to sort of pass up on. So I find myself out here, and it's really strange about how things evolve. I ended up looking back from a chance meeting in the Ritz-Carlton up in Palm Springs with a guy who was head of marketing, James Pillar, for Bentley North America. And it was really him and his kind follow-up when I moved to the States to allow me to come and work at a retailer level, because I didn't know what I was going to do. No background experience in sales, and really just stumbled into a local dealership. Yeah, here I am 5 years on from that, and still focusing on the automotive world, but obviously from a retailer perspective. And that passion's there for me still. I get a chance to meet people who are equally passionate. It's pretty cool, actually.
I mean, I think, so, you said you had no sales background from a retail sense from the automotive, but you're an enthusiast. Yeah. You love the vehicles, and you have a history of it. I mean, absolutely. Spanning back from your father.
Yeah.
So, I think that makes the best, I don't want to say salesman, but that makes the best, person to talk to about these vehicles. So when I walk into a dealership and I want to buy a Rolls-Royce, which I mean is it's the Rolls-Royce of cars.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's the best you can get. And I have a dream eventually, and we'll talk about that off camera, to own a Wraith eventually. I think they stopped making them though.
Unfortunately, in the US, they're making them in the rest of the world still, but
the importation cost would be a little expensive. Right
yeah,
now.
We'll move on from that one, but yeah, this is.
So I might have to find a couple year used, which I'm sure we can find in the market. But I have a dream. I actually, when I was a law enforcement officer only 2.5 years ago before I got into business, and when I left, I saw a Rolls-Royce my last week of work, and my partner in my zone. I saw a Rolls-Royce Wraith drive by, and it was a well-known athlete in Clearwater, Florida. And I was like, I'm going to have one of those. I said, less than 5 years, I'm going to have a Rolls-Royce. And he was like, I know you will. So, you know, I'm going to hold myself to that goal. So I'm going to have to get a Wraith sometime soon. Talking to somebody that has enthusiasm about the automotive brands, that actually cares about the brand, that cares about what the cars are all about, history, everything. I mean, I've spoken to you about Lamborghinis in the past, and you were extremely well versed on every little detail. You know, so it's not like you're just trying to push a car out the door. You're really trying to educate people. What's that like, talking to people in the really the high end luxury and supercar market, because you deal with Lamborghini and then Rolls-Royce and Bentley? What is it like dealing with that kind of clientele, and how do you think it differs from the rest of the industry?
I just haven't had that background. I didn't start off selling Chevys or whatever else it is, but my experience just talking to my customers is just, it's so varied. It's interesting. Every day I truly have no idea the conversations I'm going to have and where they're going to go. I spoke before about passion. That's what it's about. So in most cases, I'm fortunate that people are aware of my brands. I'm not having to educate. You know, obviously the expectation of Lamborghini is going to be dynamic, you know, exciting, the sound, all these emotions. The biggest challenge is really trying to help my customers work out what they want. Because, and I'm fortunate because I have those three showrooms. You know, from the spectrum, whether it's starting at the ultra luxury with Rolls-Royce, that wonderful you know, costed feel, and you know, again, it's the pinnacle. There's no finer motor car than the Rolls-Royce. There's no question about that. But therefore the driving experience, you're going to be a little bit more detached. You're not going to have the sound of the engine, the exhaust, things like that. Heading towards the other end of the spectrum with Lamborghini, you know, again, it's raucous, you know, dynamic, exciting, all those things. What's quite interesting is Bentley that fits between the two of those. So Bentley have got a history of motorsport, you know, therefore their background is the way they tune the cars, that you're going to get more feel and sensation from the engine, especially if you can, you know, even put Akrapovic race exhaust on those things, which Bentley provide, means you can have something a bit more dynamic. So it's interesting because
They provide that for the GT?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Epic, truly epic. There is nothing that sounds.
I'm gonna go on YouTube right after this, and I'm gonna have to search some videos.
100%. When you're doing that video, look up Pikes Peak. So Bentley actually raced a Bentley GT, a W12 up there, and that would be an Akrapovic race exhaust. And when I talk about Akrapovic, keeping in mind it's a factory authorized item. So. When I'm putting it on the cars, it still doesn't affect warranty. You know, it doesn't throw codes onto the cars or anything else. When I'm talking about those three brands, it's interesting because sometimes I have people coming through and they're very specific in their belief and idea, their vision of what they're looking for. And it may actually be as simple as the Bentley that fills part way between those brands is the better fit for what they're trying to do for their everyday driving. So most of my customers are in a situation where they certainly, you know, the purchases are given. There's no question about that. It's just trying to help them. You know, there's been times, there was a really sweet guy that who was insisting on buying an Aventador SV. I'll never forget this. But he had some back troubles. He was waiting for some surgery, and I'm glad to say that surgery went well. But at that point, we were fighting. I would not sell him the car. I would not do it.
He's going to need a whole other back surgery after that.
Well, not just that. The Aventador's got a scissor door. So he was requiring to be able to get out the car some leverage. But he didn't have anything to pull on to get out the car. I said, look, if you want to employ me, every time you take this Aventador SV out, I will stand there and open the doors for you. I will drive your car for you. But joking aside, he bought a Huracan, and it was the absolute best thing he possibly could have had, because at that point in life, he just needed a little bit more help. And he had a vision. He had an absolute vision about what he wanted. And sometimes you kind of need to help people through to what they need as well. So
I love the Aventador. I'm a huge fan of the car.
Yeah.
I decided 4 weeks ago when I was in Dubai, I will never buy one.
The yellow one, I saw the pictures.
The yellow one, that's right. Yeah. So I test drove, I didn't test drive it, I rented it for 48 hours. And one of my bucket list things, drive an Aventador through the Dubai desert. That's how cool can you get, you know?
Yeah, of course.
So I ripped that thing around town. It is the most uncomfortable car for me.
100%.
I'm 6'3" and I'm 235 pounds. I'm a little bit of a larger person.
Yeah.
And that's the larger of the two. You know, the Huracans are even tighter in some aspects. Coolest car I've ever driven. Would never buy one, you know, unless I have unlimited disposable income and it's just going to sit in the garage, 29 days out of the month.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So sometimes those conversations with people, again, they may be specific. It's 100% it's a Lamborghini. They absolutely need that. You know, the Lamborghini, the Aventador's got a very different nature in terms of the driving feel and sensation versus the Huracan. So it's kind of a crazy thing to say that my personal preference would be the Huracan. If I had, you know, unlimited resources, I would probably gravitate towards that. But I'm a Brit. You know, I come from a country with small roads, you know, nimble little cars like Lotuses and things. The Huracan is the best high power version of a Lotus I can ever imagine, because the handling is so sweet, it's perfect. That dual clutch transmission just means that it's just the easiest car, whether I'm out on a race circuit. Unfortunately, they sent me to Bahrain, so I did some track time in there, and just, you know, a truly epic car. The Aventador, every time I'm in it, it's an experience. There's drama. It takes me more time and effort to be able to get the return out of an Aventador experience.
Sure.
But when you get it, it's that 20% of the time behind the wheel is the best thing you're ever going to have. The howl of that V12 engine, there's very little that's like it. But yeah, so sometimes I'm actually literally trying to understand from my customers what you're doing. And I've got a very good customer friend who I bought an Aventador off, because he had it, owned it for a while. It was low miles. And I said, what are you doing here? Because he was taking it to the Starbucks drive-through. And dude, you know, it's a great car, don't get me wrong, it's epic. But I said the Evo is by far the better car in terms of what you're wanting to get out of it. And I was fortunate enough that I just happened to have a manufacturer car, and I was able to take him out and do a test drive in it. And it was the easiest experience. He has the Evo I built for him now. I built him an Evo all-wheel drive Spider, probably one of the most epic ones we've built. And loves it, and you can exploit every aspect of that performance every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes it's that sort of helping people through and understand, perhaps again, not always what they started the journey coming in to talk about one thing. Sometimes other cars are better suited.
You look at the cars, and I mean, you know, I look at the Aventador. I seen an Aventador SVJ on the internet, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that is the coolest car ever. It's a supercar. That's what you want to drive.
Yeah.
Until I drove it. And I'm like, I can't drive this thing even once a week sometimes. It's just too, it feels like it constantly wants to kill you.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I described it best.
I think the other side to it is, it's a shame I didn't get a chance to do that drive with you, because
you would have had fun.
I would have, but the other side to it is when I think about those cars and how they're used as a rental vehicle. So I'm going to tell a little story, if you don't mind, about a friend of mine who scared the living daylights out of me. I was buying a Giardo off him at the time, and he had an Aventador in for service. And he kept saying to me, Ashley, come on, drive my car, drive me the Aventador. I said, look, man, I've driven a lot of it. He said, no, you got to drive mine, you got to drive it. I've got an appointment coming in. I've got a car. I'm selling. I haven't got time. And he was no. So I made the stupid mistake of saying, I tell you what, it's warmed up. The technician's just driven it to the front. You drive me. So he pulled away from the dealership, and I don't condone the speed, but he put his foot down. The interesting thing is, when you drive the Aventador, I'm sure your experience will remind you of this. You know, that single clutch transmission, it can be quite lurchy, especially in the lower gears. But if a car, all that's happened is it's been driving around town, that transmission learns your driving pattern. So what's going to happen if we are just moving that car and shunting it backwards and forwards on the dealership? It's going to be quite lurchy. Yeah? His car, because he drove it like he stole it every day, and he launched that, I've never experienced a shift as quick as that. So 50 milliseconds is what the Aventador can shift.
Okay.
And it was in Corsa mode, so it's a brutal punch to your back as it grips. Again, depending on the driving style, can make a huge difference as to whether you enjoy an Aventador or not. But as I said, yeah, it's a shame I didn't do that drive with you, because depending on how you drive, it can make a difference.
I assume this one was driven very hard, because this one
he's a racer.
Yeah.
And I very rarely have the experience where I have to say slow down. I said it a good 8 times very loudly.
Yeah. So the one in Dubai that I drove, it was I would assume that everybody was driving it in Corsa mode.
Yeah.
I even got it in Corsa mode, so it never left Corsa mode the entire time. And I mean, I ripped this thing, which is tricky in Dubai because there's speed cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
I've never seen such a network of speed cameras in my life, to the point where I drove 20 miles outside the city.
Yeah.
They're still every mile.
Yeah, I've been there.
So you can't rip it, you know, like you really want to. So I learned a trick. They're like, as soon as you hit the speed camera, rip it, count to 12, and then pull back because the speed camera's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I had to do. And it was crazy fast. I mean, it doesn't feel like, I've driven the Huracan, I've driven other Lamborghinis, I've driven a lot of very fast cars. I just bought my first exotic recently. Baby exotic, Aston Martin.
Nice.
Proper British car, though.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
So,
I approve wholeheartedly.
Yeah, so, you know, I bought a used Vantage. Love it. You know, with the Mercedes motor, the Lotus suspension, they did a very good job on that.
Yeah, perfect.
So, you know, that compared to the Lamborghini Aventador, it's night and day. That's a race car.
And that's the thing I like to try and help my customers understand, because if someone's saying to me, you know, they're going to love it and they're going to put loads of miles on everything else, Aventador, in my mind, isn't the car you put 10,000 miles a year on. Yeah. I just don't think you get the value in the experience, because you're not going to be able to exploit that every time. So yeah, for me, absolutely the special car. And what's happening is, and maybe to talk a little bit what's going on in Lamborghini's pipeline, is we're seeing that evolution from the Aventador being the last of the naturally aspirated V12, you know, without the addition of hybrid technology or whatever else. Aventador pricing has gone absolutely sky high. I mean, I remember probably about 3 years ago sitting, you've been to my dealership, and I'm fortunate my office has got this great view of the cars in the front. I've currently got a view of an Asenza SCV12 3 million race car, which is just sitting there, makes my day brilliant. So, but I remember having 3 Aventador S's parked in the front, and I remember those moments when I'd be thinking about the floor plan. You know, that's a lot of expensive real estate, you know, we have there. I would kill for any one of those 3 cars to have the opportunity to sell them now, because my customers have benefited in immense ways. The way that the market has gone, the demand on these cars means that, you know, certainly Aventador pricing is significantly higher. People are seeing it as the one to add to a collection. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I said I worked for Porsche all those years ago, and I was there with the transition from 993, the air-cooled, into the 996 water-cooled. And pricing on those cars, the earlier, older car, is the one that people would cherish and pay more for now as a result, because it was, you know, it was that sound, the feel, the emotion, the experience.
They're selling for an astronomical amount in auction.
Exactly.
Astronomical.
I know. I follow them. Believe me.
My friend just bought one in Pennsylvania. One of the owners of Axe and Sledge supplement lines. He's got a GT3. He's got a GT2 RS.
Nice.
And he just bought an old air cool.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got a collection.
But it's interesting. So again, people are choosing that because of the feel, the emotion. You know, again, life's about passion. So it's interesting what we're seeing moving forward with Lamborghini. So I was at the Rolex 24-hour race a few months back, and we were very fortunate the CEO of Lamborghini joined us there, and we were hearing a little bit about the pipeline of what's coming through. So we know for a fact that all of these car companies are having to lean more towards, you know, EV solutions. Lamborghini's focus on that is obviously going with hybrid. We're expecting probably from 2024 onwards is when they're talking about us seeing some addition to the range to make that possible. So, and watch this space. We'll see exactly what that is to be. But yeah, the likes of the Huracan, the Aventador now, which we know is just this immense visceral feel and sensation. People aren't quite sure what's coming through. Now, we know for a fact, you know, Lamborghini, of course, it's going to be dynamic. It's going to look amazing. It's going to sound fantastic. It may have a different sound to it. We're not quite sure what that's going to be yet. So yeah, as a result of that, people are snapping up these cars, and it's making time at the dealership a little bit more challenging. These cars don't sit. You know, if anything, you know, having a good quality salesperson assisting you through the process is key now, not because they're going to help you on the day, because they're going to give you the heads up about what's coming in on trade. That's the big difference. And it's wonderful to think of all those customers I've helped over the years, because I know for a fact they're sitting very happy with what they bought. I've got cars out there that I sold a couple of years ago were worth more than I sold them for. You know,
that's how we met. We had a conversation about that. I mean, I walked in the dealership, and mind you, there was really a very rare chance I would be able to afford a Lamborghini at that point. Yeah. It's kind of projecting, you know, some future ideas. You know, I will buy a Lamborghini at some point, or a Bentley, or a Rolls-Royce, all of which I love. They're my 3 favorite brands. So I went in there, we looked at the Huracan, I remember, and, you know, I pulled up in a older Audi. I'm sure you saw me pull up. Salesmen always look outside what people pull up in. If I pulled up in their Lamborghini, you know, that says something. but you educated me. You treated me exactly how you'd probably treat every single customer walking in there.
Absolutely.
I don't even remember what the MSRP was on the Hurricane back then. It was a couple of years ago.
I mean, realistically, if it was coupes, which
It was a coupe.
Yeah, but low 200s realistic.
I think it was 225 or 230. So maybe 230. And you're like, just letting you know the way the market is looking, I'm going to buy this back from you in a year for probably 270. I think you literally gave me a number. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense. There's no way. And I even left with my wife. I'm like, that can't be possible.
Yeah.
And then over the last year, I've been kicking myself. I'm like, should have found the damn money.
But it's interesting because one challenge I've got is that not having a background in sales, I was never really sure how to deal with the issue of people being concerned, the salespeople disingenuous or
Sure.
So when I'm giving advice like that, I'm fortunate because I get a chance to see a number of things. I get to see the market. Obviously, we're keeping a very close eye on what's going on with cars. But more importantly, I can see the allocations. I can see in terms of obviously what cars we're ordering. At that time, I remember looking at it and thinking, well, we're not ordering cars for inventory. We already, that meant that, sort of 6 months out, it would be at least, 6, 7, 8 months wait to have a new car arriving that I could sell on the showroom floor.
That was in the early days of COVID too.
It was.
Plants were shut down in Italy, from what I understand.
There was a few things that that really happened, and this is my opinion on it. Okay. So first of all, as a salesperson working at a dealership, I looked at it and thought, how is this going to change, what I'm doing in my day-to-day? I've got a son that's got asthma, so I was nervous about whether I go to the dealership. And actually, they were gracious enough to allow me to work from home for a month. That month, I had a really good month, but I worked, harder than I've ever done. And I got 8 sales, but it was almost impossible. I explored every opportunity of anyone I could possibly speak with. And dealerships were being a bit more open in terms of discounting at that point, because again, we didn't know who's going to be coming in the door. What's the future looking like? I have to imagine this is what happened to all dealerships, but we depleted our inventory. We took the opportunity to sell cars when we could, but then at the same time, the factory was under lockdown for a period of time. The conversations I had with people when they were being told about what they could and couldn't do, and you can't travel, you can't do this. Well, one thing that my customers who had the means to buy the cars could do is actually be at home, enjoy the things around them, and having a car was part of that. Walking in the garage would make them happy, So we started building cars. That's what I started doing. We depleted inventory. I started building these allocations for customers, and it just didn't end. So already I could see that we were very quickly taking those allocations. We no longer had cars coming in for inventory, because why would we? We're going to focus on customers first. So yeah, that was the early stages, and I could see that was coming through, and therefore I knew that they wouldn't have the cars on the showroom floor in the way what we're experiencing now. So,
and that was with all 3 brands.
So I would say pretty much every brand out there. I mean, it's crazy when you hear about Kias and Hondas going over sticker, and I mentioned this earlier. My dealership group, Fields Auto, we have an immensely respectful way of working with our customers, because we have a commitment that we're selling at sticker price on our cars. And here I am, I'm seeing the market in terms of what's going on with Urus, Huracan, crazy pricing. But, we made a commitment at the outset, and we've adhered to that. And it's really great to be able to stand apart versus, there's an awful lot of other alternatives out there. And it's meant that respectful approach. We're certainly, we're getting the benefit of those customers coming back. But when it comes to pre-owned, obviously it has to be market value. I've explained, I've got customers that have bought cars off me a couple of years ago, and they're expecting more than I sold them for. But yeah, that's what, as a snapshot, that's what I saw in terms of our brands. I mean, Bentley have done exceptionally well in terms of being able to keep the production running. I'm in a good situation. I can order Bentleys, and I'm not really seeing too much of an impact on that. Really, 6, 7, 8 months is a perfectly good time frame on the basis these cars are built back at Crewe. As a result of that, I'm finding that many more people are looking at pre-owned cars, because that's just if you have that desire and need to suddenly get something now, that's what the opportunity is, really.
Do you see that eventually capping out, or do you think this price point is kind of where it is and it's not really going to come down? Because I really don't know with inflation and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the dollar is losing value a little bit. We all know that.
Yeah.
I had that asked, and I have a Ram TRX that I bought at basically MSRP.
Well done, then.
I did well.
Yeah.
You can go out there and you'll find dealerships selling them used for $110,000, which is $20,000 over MSRP. It's insane.
It is.
And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I would probably sell mine for 110 right now if someone offered it.
So I have that on a regular basis. I've got customers coming through, and the people I meet at the dealership, sometimes they're in for service. So that, I can actually see which car they own right now. I can talk through and give numbers and look at giving a buy figure. But the challenge is, what do they buy next? With the opportunity for tax credit, with my customers trading cars in, that can make quite a big difference. So, and that really, currently that runs with an opportunity to have that tax applied to a purchase within a year. So if we know there's maybe a 2-year wait list on a Lamborghini, I can't help that person into the next new car. So that makes a bit of a difference in terms of, that's why some of my customers choose to hold on to the cars. To answer your question, and again, it's just my opinion in terms of what I see going forwards. I speak to a lot of my customers and ask them the same question. It's not as clear-cut to answer it specifically on Lamborghini. And the reason I say that is that we aren't in a point where the only thing that's impacting us is interest rate hikes or whatever else, which means that, for example, Huracan, if we look at a typical 10-year life cycle with a Lamborghini product, and we've seen that with Gallardo, Murcielago, Aventador and Huracan is what we expect, then we're in those last few years. 2015 is when the Huracan came out. So we're getting close to the end of that production cycle. It's tough to say how Huracan pricing is going to be, because in my mind, I still think of it like the air-cooled Porsche we were talking about.
Sure. The
one that's visceral, exciting, dynamic. There's always going to be a demand at some point in the future for that car. I mean, sure. They're robust. I mean, there was a great advert for us. It was a Las Vegas rental car. I don't know if you ever saw it. It went online. It had, I think it was 180,000 miles. And let's be clear, a Las Vegas rental car, that thing was beat on every day of its life.
Absolutely.
I know the guy who bought it. We had a good chat, and actually it's a good car from what I understand. It's tough to say what's going to happen with Huracan pricing because there's so many different factors there. I mean, will the market change in overall pricing for cars? I mean, if I was that good at guessing it, I'd be making more money in terms of, it's like stocks and shares, isn't it, really? I'd be stockpiling Huracans at home if that was the case.
That's right.
I think the key thing, and I try and explain this to my customers, is it a good product? Absolutely, there's no question about that. Is it dynamic? Is it exciting? Is it something you'd have a passion with, and would you be happy to have in your garage? Great. That is the absolute bare minimum. You have to have that. Just buying a car because they're crazy overpriced at the moment doesn't mean to say you should do that, because if the market shifts and you're left with something that you don't have that passion and excitement for, then there's going to be a little bit of hurt there. But from my perspective, there's just no bad element to owning a Huracan because you're going to love it anyway. I remember a couple of years ago when people would buy these cars with the full expectation there'd be a depreciation.
Everybody always says, don't invest in vehicles. They're a liability, not an asset. I'm like, oh, not anymore. Some vehicles especially. I mean, if I would have purchased that Lamborghini from you at $230, I don't think I've seen a Huracan that spec under $300 used.
That makes sense.
It's about $310, I think is what they're going for. So, I mean, I could have driven that car for basically free and made money on it.
Absolutely.
What other vehicle can even do that? And I think Rolls-Royce is doing that as well. I think some Bentleys are even keeping their value and increasing.
You have to think about the scarcity. So people, the opportunity for choice isn't there in the same way it used to be. So absolutely, if there's a shortage of new product that's sitting on the showroom floor, and with us being respectful of selling a sticker, it's not difficult for us to sell those cars. So they're not hanging around. Absolutely, people can't get hold of much, and therefore you grab what you can. And cars like that Huracan, there's so many. As I said, I'd love to say it's just Lamborghini in that situation. It's really not. But we're fortunate because we get a chance to sell everything that's pre-owned. So I never know what my trading is going to be. Is it Ferraris, McLarens, whatever else it may be? Crazy times. How long it will go for, I don't know. But
yeah, well, I don't see the market slowing down. I see more people buying more exotics.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more every day, it seems.
I think what I'm seeing also is those people that have seen the benefit of made those what was probably quite brave choices early on in COVID, realise their businesses haven't been impacted, their wealth or assets are still strong. they're coming back for the next one. And that's something I have seen, is that the length of ownership has changed in some ways.
Meaning shorter duration?
Yeah, because I suppose there's a little bit of a frenzy from that perspective, because people have hit that mentality of like, look what I've achieved. Oh my gosh, I bought this and it's gone up. I'm going to do it again. And that's why I do my best to make sure that I'm matching people with the right car, because you know, I don't know how long they'll keep it for, but for whatever reason, in a few years' time, if there's been a shift there, we should all embrace the idea of ownership of these cars as not being appreciating assets.
Sure,
you 100% should embrace that. You know, it's crazy when I have conversations with people that complain that if I buy this car, I'm probably only going to make X amount of money. I'm like, seriously? I remember, years ago buying everyday cars, Toyotas, whatever else, and you would embrace the, five-digit depreciation. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy times, and I suppose one thing that's good for us is it's brought new people into the market. So people would never really have considered Lamborghini in the past have come into the brand, and we're fortunate because that's happened through like product like the Urus. So with the SUV, when that came through, I hadn't really thought about what the marketing team at Lamborghini were doing at the outset. And I think they were immensely intelligent, because when we saw these cars arrive, initially the color schemes, we had the whites, the grays, the silvers, the blacks, the blues. Okay, there was a yellow, there was a red, but there wasn't that many distinctive colors. There wasn't the typical, palettes of oranges, greens, and things. And now I look back on it, I realize how smart they were, because they were recognizing that there was a demand for people buying these cars. And the customers were going to be in Mercedes G-Wagons, Bentley Bentegas, a whole variety of other products. And Lamborghini, if they suddenly threw all their products out there in bright green and orange, it'll probably scare a few people away.
Sure, because people like minimal colors. Most people are going with the whites, blacks, and grays.
Absolutely.
No matter what car company it is.
Yeah, I mean, we see that, and that can help with resale. The interesting thing now is that Lamborghini have gone full throttle with our color schemes. So, you do have the Urus in bright green, bright orange. And I love the fact they have that as an opportunity now. And if anything, it certainly doesn't detract now, because we have the opportunity of the Urus getting in the marketplace and getting noticed. And the car's epic. It really is.
It's amazing.
So, and it's funny because I did a day of test drive events up in Jacksonville. Drove the car up there, spent 8 hours of being sort of thrown around, sitting alongside passengers. And the thing that really surprised me is my love of the car was driving home. But putting it in normal everyday strada mode and just driving it back, the capability of that as a normal everyday car is phenomenal. To think that they can have a dynamic sports car like that and it still be able to do the everyday, that's pretty impressive. So we are encouraging more people into the brand. That's the key thing. And can we meet that demand? Well, this is challenging times, because it's a niche manufacturer. We're not Mercedes. We're not making millions of these cars. Again, the fact you don't see them every day is part of the appeal, isn't it?
I see an overwhelming amount of Uruses in Windermere, Dr. Phillips, which is where I live. I live in Windermere. And it's amazing, because sometimes you're seeing like soccer moms driving it with their kids.
Absolutely.
You would have never imagined that 10 years ago. It just wouldn't have happened. Now, I have to ask, before we finish up, and you can say, I don't know if you're allowed to say other brands, what are your favorite brands? Give me top 3 favorite brands. If you had unlimited funds, the 3 brands that you would buy if you want to get specific cars, your 3 dream cars, I'd love to hear them. And they could be classics. They could be classics.
Gosh.
Just give me 3 you can riddle off real quick.
This is tough. Okay, Lancia. First of all, I have one. I've got a Lancia back in England.
Okay.
And it's sitting there with a friend, thankfully still driving it and keeping it running. Very few people know what it is, but back in the day, in the 1950s, I mean, they raced Formula One. I mean, there was a good enough car that Ferrari actually put their prancing horse on there with a D50. So those people in the Lancia, their motorsport credentials phenomenal. So yeah, and there's such a array of ones. I don't know, Stratos, whatever it is.
Sure.
Alfa Romeo. I'm going to stay with some Italian brands. So my father worked for them as well, and there's a particular car called the SZ. They didn't make it in the States, but truly epic. The ugliest car called Il Monstro, literally was called the Monster. The Monster. Right now, if that would, it stood the test of time. It's still ugly, hasn't changed. Beyond that, I'm going to stay Italian. It's got to be Lamborghini.
Yeah,
and the Huracan. I mean, it's it's amazing. It doesn't matter which variant of the Huracan for me. I mean, we've got the STO, the Super Trofeo homologation. I've sold a few of those, and it's been an absolute dream to be involved in with the factory doing the ad persona program, making these cars absolutely perfect for them. But realistically, any of the Huracan variant,
even the base is an amazing car. Like you can't go wrong.
Truly, I mean, as I'm saying this, I have in my mind, I know exactly what it was. It was the Evo all-wheel drive coupe in orange. Arancio Zanto. I was fortunate to drive it in Bahrain on the race circuit, and I've got pictures of me with that car. And on the basis that was the first opportunity to really drive it, push it in ways that were, in all fairness, exceeding my skill level. But the great thing with that car, torque vectoring, rear wheel steering, the magneto-rheological suspension. There's a system called LDVI, Lamborghini Dynamic Vehicle Integrator, and it's all these systems working cohesively. And if you want to see something cool, just do a quick search of Huracan Evo Drift. That video was taken on the day at Bahrain circuit after I left, and I got a chance to drift it around the corner in the same way that professional driver did, because the car is able to take to the next level. My skill levels are here, I'm okay. The car helps you.
The car maximizes your skill.
Absolutely. I had the car drifting around the corner for about 3 seconds, and I couldn't do that. And a circuit I don't know, and a car I don't know that well, yeah, I'd never do that. But the opportunity with these cars and some of the technologies we're getting to help us, take those steps forward, that's the third car.
Ashley, thank you for joining us. Thank you for talking about supercars with us. Thank you for doing what you do. And if anybody needs anything, they can go to the Lamborghini, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Orlando.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Cheers, mate.